I was dressed in white, but I felt like I was being buried alive. That was the first honest thought I had on my wedding day. Standing in the bridal suite of St. Augustine Church while 300 white roses filled the room with a sweetness that made my stomach turn. The dress cost more than my first car. Ivory satin, hand-sewn pearls, a train long enough to make my mother cry when she first saw it. Everyone kept telling me I looked beautiful. That was the problem. Beautiful things could still be cages. I stared at myself in the tall antique mirror and tried to recognize the woman looking back. She had my brown hair pinned into soft waves. She had my pale skin, my green eyes, my small scar near the right eyebrow from falling off a bike when I was 9. But she did not look like Claire Bennett. She looked like a careful version of me, polished until nothing real was left. The veil softened my face. The diamond ring on my finger caught the morning light and threw tiny sparks across the wall. Outside the door, bridesmaids whispered. A photographer laughed too loudly. Somewhere below us, the organist practiced the first notes of the wedding march, each chord rising through the church like a warning I was supposed to mistake for music. My hands were cold. Not nervous cold. Wrong cold. The kind of cold that settles into your bones when your body understands something your mind is still trying to deny. I pressed my palms against the skirt of my dress and told myself to breathe. In through the nose. Out through the mouth. 10 minutes. In 10 minutes I would walk down the aisle toward Evan Whitmore. The man everyone said was perfect for me. Evan with his blue eyes, his clean smile, his family name printed on hospital wings and university libraries. Evan who sent flowers every Monday, opened doors in public, remembered my mother's favorite wine, and always knew exactly what to say when someone important was listening. He had saved us, my mother said. After my father died, after the bills piled up, after the house in Lake Forest started feeling less like a home and more like a debt with windows, Evan had appeared with solutions. A generous loan. A business. Connection. A promise that the Bennett name would not collapse under grief and bad paperwork. Love, my mother called it. Stability. A blessing. But blessings were not supposed to feel like locked doors. I touched the locket at my throat, hidden beneath the lace. It had belonged to my father. Small silver, scratched at the edge from years of his thumb rubbing over it when he was thinking. Inside was a faded photo of him holding me when I was 4, both of us laughing into summer light. He had been gone 3 years, but on that morning, I missed him so sharply I almost bent in half from it. My father would have noticed my hands. He would have asked why my smile stopped before it reached my eyes. He would have closed the door, lowered his voice and said, "Claire, tell me the truth." But the dead do not stop weddings. The living do. A knock sounded at the door. Soft. Controlled. My mother entered before I could answer, wearing champagne silk and pearls, her makeup flawless except for the tightness around her mouth. Margaret Bennett had always believed panic was something a woman should powder over. Her eyes swept over me, checking the veil, the dress, the ring, the performance. Then she smiled. "There you are," she said. "Everyone is waiting." Everyone. Not me. Never me. I looked at her reflection beside mine and felt the room shrink by inches. "Mom," I whispered. "What if I cannot do this?" Her smile vanished so quickly it frightened me. She crossed the room, took my hands and squeezed just hard enough to make the ring press into my skin. "You are tired," she said. "You are emotional. That is normal." "It does not feel normal." Her eyes flicked toward the door, as if fear itself might overhear us and embarrass the family. "Claire, listen to me. Today is not the day for doubts." My throat tightened. "Then when is?" She let go of my hands and adjusted my veil with fingers that trembled once before becoming steady again. "A Bennett woman does not humiliate her family at the altar." The words landed harder than any shout could have. I looked back at the mirror. The bride looked perfect. The daughter looked trapped. And somewhere below us, the church doors opened and closed, letting in a rush of cold air I could feel even from upstairs. I did not know it yet, but the man who would stop my wedding had just entered the building. My mother called it love, but it felt like a debt with flowers wrapped around it. She stood behind me in the mirror, smoothing the veil over my shoulders as if the right angle of lace could hide the fact that I was trembling. Downstairs, the organ shifted into a softer melody, and the sound crawled through the old church walls like a polite warning. St. Augustine had been built 100 years ago. All dark wood, Stained glass and stone saints staring down from corners with faces that knew too much. My parents had married here. I had been baptized here. My father's funeral had filled the same pews 3 years earlier. Black coats packed shoulder to shoulder beneath the same white marble altar where I was supposed to promise my life to Evan Whitmore. Maybe that was why the room felt wrong. Maybe my body remembered grief better than obedience. "You are overthinking," my mother said, fastening one pearl button at the back of my dress. "Brides do that. Brides are supposed to be happy." Her hands paused for less than a second. "Happiness comes after stability." I turned from the mirror. The skirt moved with me in a heavy whisper, satin brushing the hardwood floor. "Is that what you told yourself?" Her face tightened. For a moment I saw the woman behind the pearls, the widow who had spent 3 years answering phone calls from banks, lawyers, creditors, and polite men who smiled while they measured what was left of us. Then the mask returned. "I told myself the truth," she said. "Your father left us in trouble, Claire. Not because he meant to, but because good men can still make terrible financial decisions. Evan stepped in when everyone else stepped away. He stepped in because he wanted something. He wants you." The words sounded rehearsed. I almost laughed, but it would have come out broken. "Does he?" My mother crossed to the small table where my bouquet waited in a glass vase. White roses, white peonies, white ribbon. Everything pure. Everything expensive. "He wants a future with you. He wants to protect this family." "By buying it?" Her eyes snapped to mine. "Lower your voice." That was when I understood how deep the fear had gone in her. Not fear of Evan exactly. Fear of losing the house. Fear of neighbors whispering. Fear of the Bennett name becoming a cautionary tale passed around charity luncheons in Lake Forest. My mother did not fear cages if the cage looked respectable from the street. She lifted the bouquet and pressed it into my hands. The stems were wrapped so tightly they felt like a handle, something to grip so I would not run. "You think love is supposed to rescue you," she said. "That is because your father spoiled you with impossible ideas." My chest hurt. Dad wanted me to choose. "Your father is gone." The room went still. Even the organ below seemed to fade for one breath. My fingers closed around the bouquet until the ribbon creased. "Do not use him to make me quiet." Her expression flickered. "Guilt maybe." Then fear swallowed it. "I am trying to keep us alive." "No, iwisparat. You are trying to keep us acceptable." The words shocked both of us. They hung between the dress and the mirror and the locked future waiting downstairs. My mother looked at me as if I had slapped the air out of her. But I had only told the truth. A knock came again. This time brisker. One of the bridesmaids cracked the door open, her smile bright and nervous. "Mrs. Bennett? They are almost ready." My mother did not look away from me. "We will be down in a minute." The door closed. I could hear movement beyond it, heels clicking, fabric rustling. Someone laughing too loudly because weddings made people perform joy whether joy was present or not. My mother stepped closer, lowering her voice until it became something sharp and private. "Listen to me carefully. Evan's family holds the note on the house. They paid the legal fees. They kept your father's business records out of court. If you walk away today, you will not just embarrass me. You will destroy what little he left behind." The bouquet slipped in my hands. "Why did you not tell me?" "Because I wanted you to have one beautiful thing before reality took the rest." Beautiful. There it was. Again. The word everyone used when they meant expensive enough to silence pain. I looked down at the diamond on my finger. Suddenly it did not look like a promise. It looked like collateral. "Does Evan know all of this?" My mother's silence answered before she did. "He has been very generous." The floor seemed to tilt beneath the dress. I thought of every dinner where Evan had smiled at me across candlelight, every time he had touched the small of my back in public as if presenting something he already owned, every time he had told me not to worry my pretty head about documents and signatures. My mouth went dry. "This is not a wedding," I said. "This is repayment." My mother's eyes filled, but no tears fell. Margaret Bennett did not waste tears when control would do. She took my left hand and turned the ring until the diamond faced straight. "Smile, Claire," she whispered. "A Bennett woman does not humiliate her family at the altar." Downstairs the organ stopped practicing. The silence that followed was worse than music. It meant time was up. The hallway outside the bridal suite smelled like hairspray, old wood and lilies left too long in warm air. My mother walked beside me with one hand hovering near my elbow, not quite touching, but close enough to guide me if I slowed down. That was how she had always loved me after my father died. Not with arms around me but with pressure. Gentle pressure. Polished pressure. The kind no one else could see. My bridesmaids waited near the staircase in pale champagne dresses, their faces arranged into careful smiles. Hannah, my college roommate, squeezed my hand when I passed. Her eyes searched mine for the truth, but my mother was watching, so I gave her the version of myself everyone had come to see. Calm. Grateful. Almost happy. At the foot of the stairs, Evan Whitmore was waiting. He should not have been there. The groom was supposed to be hidden away somewhere with his brothers and groomsmen, laughing too loudly, checking cuff links, pretending he was nervous. But Evan stood beneath the stained glass window of St. Michael with his hands folded in front of him, looking as perfect as a magazine advertisement for old money. Navy tuxedo. White boutonniere. Blonde hair combed back. Blue eyes bright enough to make people trust him before he earned it. When he saw me, he smiled. Everyone else would have called it tender. I saw the calculation behind it because for once I was finally looking. Claire, he said. You look stunning. My mother's shoulders relaxed as if that one sentence had restored the whole world. I will give you two a moment, she said, though her eyes warned me not to use it poorly. She moved a few steps away, still close enough to return if my courage became inconvenient. Evan offered his hand. I looked at it. His nails were clean. His cufflinks were silver. His palm was dry and cold when I let him take my fingers. You are shaking, he said softly. It is my wedding day. Our wedding day, he corrected. The words were quiet, but the correction landed like a pin pressed under my skin. He led me into the small side chapel, just beyond the main hall, where votive candles flickered beneath a statue of Mary. The door stayed open, public enough to look proper, private enough for him to stop performing. His smile faded first. Not entirely, just enough that the man beneath it showed through. Your mother told me you were having doubts. My stomach tightened. Of course she had. I asked a question. Questions become problems when they are asked 10 minutes before a ceremony. I think I deserve answers before I promise my life to someone. His thumb moved over my ring, turning the diamond so it caught the candlelight. After today, you will have all the answers you need. That is not an answer. His eyes lifted to mine. Still blue. Still beautiful. Suddenly cold. It is the only one that matters. The air in the side chapel seemed to thin. Behind him, the candles burned in small glass cups, each flame trembling but contained. I wondered if that was how I looked. Bright enough from far away. Trapped up close. Evan stepped nearer, lowering his voice until it became a thing made only for me. Listen carefully, Claire. Your father left a mess. Your mother did what she had to do. I did what no one else was willing to do. I protected your family from public disgrace. By holding our house over us? By preserving what your father failed to protect. The insult to my father cut cleaner than I expected. My fingers curled around the bouquet stems. Do not talk about him like that. Evan's expression softened at once, but now I knew softness could be a costume. See? This is why I did not want you involved in the paperwork. You are emotional, loyal, sweet. Those are lovely qualities in a wife, but they are dangerous in business. A wife, not his wife. A wife like a role already written and waiting for a body. What paperwork? I asked. The tiny pause before he answered told me more than the answer did. After the wedding, the remaining Bennett assets will be restructured under our family office. It is cleaner that way. My father's house is in my name. For now. The room tilted again, but this time something inside me did not collapse. It sharpened. You planned this. Evan sighed, almost disappointed. I planned a future. For me. For us. No. Y whisperat. For yourself. His face went still. Then he smiled again, and the smile was worse because it was patient. You are frightened. That is understandable. Big changes feel like loss before they feel like security. I pulled my hand from his. The ring felt heavier without his fingers around it. I am not marrying a husband. I said, the truth arriving with a terrible calm. I am signing myself over to a stranger. For the first time all morning, Evan looked annoyed. Not angry. Not loud. Just inconvenienced by my awakening. The music is starting, he said. Fix your face before your mother sees you. From the main church, the organ began the opening notes. Guests rustled. Someone laughed in a bright, nervous way. My mother appeared in the doorway, eyes moving from Evan to me, reading the space between us like a warning. Evan stepped back into his perfect posture. The mask returned so completely I wondered how many people had ever seen it slip. He offered his arm. Shall we? I looked at his arm, then at the aisle waiting beyond the chapel doors, lined with white roses and people who thought they had come to witness love. My feet moved because shock can imitate obedience. But as I stepped into the church, I touched the locket hidden at my throat and felt something inside it shift. A small click beneath the lace, like my father had left one last secret close to my heart. The aisle looked longer than it had during rehearsal. That was the first thing I noticed when the church doors opened for me. Yesterday, it had been 30 feet of carpet and flower petals. Today, it felt like a mile of judgment dressed in white. Every pew was full. Lake Forest neighbors, Evan's business partners, my mother's charity friends, distant cousins who had not called once after my father died but had arrived early for the open bar. Their faces turned toward me in one smooth motion, smiling with the soft hunger people bring to expensive weddings. The organ rose around us, beautiful and unbearable. My bouquet trembled in my hands. White roses brushed against my waist. My mother had already slipped into the front pew, chin lifted, pearls glowing at her throat, the perfect picture of a woman whose daughter had made the correct decision. Evan waited at the altar beneath the stained glass, his smile restored, his hands folded, his blue eyes fixed on me like he was watching property cross a room. I took one step, then another. Satin whispered over the runner. My heels pressed into the carpet. Beside me, my Uncle Richard offered his arm because my father was not there to walk me, and every step with the wrong man standing at the end reminded me of the right man who was gone. I touched the locket through the lace again with my free hand. The tiny click I had felt earlier still haunted me. Something inside it had shifted, but I could not open it here. Not with 300 people watching me become obedient. Halfway down the aisle, my eyes found the empty space where my father should have been. Front left pew. He would have cried without hiding it. He would have smiled at me like I was walking toward a life I had chosen, not one that had been arranged around unpaid bills and polite threats. My throat burned. Evan's smile narrowed, just a fraction, warning me to keep moving. So I did. Shock can move your feet when your soul has already stopped. At the altar, Evan took my hand before I was ready. His fingers closed around mine, cold and certain. The priest smiled gently, unaware that the bride standing before him could barely feel her own body. Dearly beloved, he began, and the words floated up into the vaulted ceiling where saints and angels watched without interfering. My mother exhaled. Evan's thumb pressed once against my ring, a silent command. The ceremony moved forward. Opening prayer. A reading from Corinthians. A soft laugh from the guests when the priest mentioned patience and kindness. I almost laughed too, but it would have sounded like breaking. Then came the question that belonged to old stories and last chances. The priest looked out over the church. If anyone here can show just cause why these two should not be joined, let them speak now or forever hold their peace. Silence. Of course, silence. Respectable people loved silence when truth was inconvenient. My pulse sounded in my ears. Evan's grip tightened for 1 second, then relaxed. He thought the danger had passed. Then the great wooden doors at the back of the church opened. Not slowly, not dramatically, just wide enough to let in a blade of cold December air that swept down the aisle and lifted the edge of my veil. Every head turned. The organist stopped. 100 tiny sounds filled the space at once. A gasp, a shifting heel, a pearl necklace clicking against someone's collarbone. A man stood in the doorway wearing a black overcoat that looked made for winter and warnings. He was tall, broad-shouldered, maybe 35, with dark hair brushed back from a face carved in hard lines and controlled patience. His skin was pale under the churchlight, his eyes a flat storm gray that did not search the room. They found me immediately. 2 men in dark suits stood behind him, but they did not enter. They did not need to. The man in black walked alone down the aisle. Each step measured, quiet, impossible to ignore. No one stopped him. Not the ushers. Not Evan's groomsmen. Not even Evan, whose hand went rigid around mine. The stranger's gaze did not leave my face until he reached the first row. Then he looked at Evan. The temperature in the church seemed to fall. "Dominic Hayes," Evan said, his voice polished but thin. A murmur moved through the pews. I knew the name only from whispers. A man tied to private clubs, sealed court cases, businesses that changed ownership overnight, charity foundations no one understood. A dangerous man. A mafia man, people said when they thought polite rooms could not hear them. Dominic turned his eyes back to me, and what startled me was not the danger in them. It was the grief. "Claire Bennett," he said, voice low enough to be calm and clear enough to reach the back pew. "Do not marry him." My mother stood so fast her program fell to the floor. "How dare you?" Evan stepped slightly in front of me, a groom defending a performance. "This is a private ceremony." Dominic did not raise his voice. "Not until she knows what he did to her father." The church went so still I could hear my own breath catch beneath the veil. Dominic Hayes did not move like a man interrupting a wedding. He moved like a verdict arriving late but still in time. The aisle stayed open before him, lined with white roses and stunned faces, and every step he took seemed to pull another layer of performance from the room. Evan's fingers tightened around mine until the diamond pressed into my skin. I looked down at our joined hands and realized he was not holding me for comfort. He was holding me in place. Dominic noticed. Of course he noticed. His storm gray eyes dropped to Evan's hand, then lifted slowly to his face. He said nothing, but Evan released me as if silence itself had given an order. My hand fell to my side, cold and pulsing. The priest cleared his throat once, helplessly. "Sir, this is highly inappropriate." Dominic reached inside his overcoat and removed a thick cream envelope sealed with dark wax. "No weapon." No threat. Just paper. Somehow that frightened the church more. "So was the contract your groom signed 3 weeks after her father's funeral," Dominic said. Evan laughed, but the sound came out too smooth, too prepared. "This is absurd. Claire, you do not know this man." I looked at Dominic. That was true. I did not know him. I knew only his name from whispers and the way my mother had gone pale the second he appeared. I knew only that he had walked into a church full of powerful people and made all of them quiet without raising his voice. "What contract?" I asked. Evan turned toward me, softening his face for the audience. "A business matter. Nothing you need to worry about today." Today. As if there would be a later when he would willingly hand me the truth. Dominic stepped to the altar and placed the envelope beside the open Bible. The wax seal caught the light like dried blood, though it was only burgundy. "Ask him," Dominic said. "Ask your groom what he bought with your father's debt." My mother made a small sound from the front pew, the kind of sound a person makes when a secret slips before they can catch it. I turned to her. "Mom." Her lips parted. No answer came. That silence did more damage than any confession could have. Evan's mask cracked at the edges. "Margaret," he said sharply. "Not Mrs. Bennett. Not Mom. Margaret." Like a partner in something hidden. Dominic opened the envelope himself, slow enough that no one could accuse him of chaos. He removed copies of bank statements, legal filings, property transfers, signatures I recognized with a sick twist in my stomach. My father's name. Robert Bennett. Curved letters, strong downstrokes, the way he used to sign birthday cards and permission slips and checks for school fundraisers. But some signatures looked wrong. Almost right. Close enough to fool someone who wanted to be fooled. Dominic handed the papers to the priest first, then to my Uncle Richard, then finally held one out to me. He did not step too close. He waited until I reached for it. My fingers trembled against the paper. It showed a private debt assignment tied to the Lake Forest house, my father's old business accounts, and Evan's family office. Dates. Amounts. Clauses. Words I did not fully understand but could feel tightening around my life. "This says the remaining assets transfer after marriage," I whispered. Evan's voice became gentle again, and I hated him for how good he was at it. "It protects you." From whom? From making emotional decisions. The church heard that. I felt it ripple through the pews. Phew. Guests looked down. One of Evan's groomsmen shifted his weight. Hannah covered her mouth, eyes shining. Dominic took out another page. Your father refused this arrangement before he died. Evan's face went still. My heart stopped in a quiet way. What? Dominic looked at me then, and for the first time the hardness in him seemed to cost him something. Robert Bennett knew what Evan wanted. He said no. The locket beneath my lace suddenly felt warm against my skin, as if my father's name had woken something inside it. You are lying, Evan said. But he was looking at Dominic, not me. Dominic placed the final document on the altar. Then explain why your attorney filed the amended papers using a copy of her father's signature 6 months after he was buried. The words moved through the church like cold air under a door. 6 months after he was buried. I stared at my mother. Her hands were clasped so tightly in her lap her knuckles had gone white. You knew, I said. It was not a question. Her eyes filled, but still she tried to save the shape of the day. I knew there were complications. Complications. My voice shook, but it did not break. You let me walk toward him. I thought I was protecting you. Dominic's voice cut through the space, quiet and merciless in its clarity. No. You were protecting the family name. My mother flinched because truth spoken by a dangerous man was still truth. Evan stepped forward, smile gone now, all charm stripped down to polished anger. This man is a criminal. Are you seriously going to believe him over your future husband? I looked at the papers in my hand, then at the ring on my finger, then at my mother who could not meet my eyes. The church had not gasped when Dominic spoke. It gasped when my mother stopped denying it. And in that silence, surrounded by roses, candles, and 300 witnesses, I finally understood that the altar had never been the beginning of my marriage. It was supposed to be the closing of a deal. I thought truth would feel like thunder when it finally arrived. I thought the room would split open, that people would shout, that the chandelier lights would flicker, that some holy sign would mark the moment my life stopped belonging to everyone else. But truth arrived quietly. It sat in my hands as a stack of papers, cream-colored and cold, covered in signatures, dates, and numbers that made my wedding dress feel heavier by the second. I looked at Evan, then at my mother, then at the altar where the envelope lay beside the open Bible like an accusation polite enough for church. 300 people waited for me to cry, to faint, to forgive, to perform the acceptable version of shock. I did none of those things. My fingers went to the veil first. The lace had been pinned so carefully into my hair that it pulled when I lifted it, tiny bites against my scalp, but I kept going. One pin slipped free. Then another. Hannah made a small sound from the bridesmaid line, half sob, half prayer. My mother whispered my name. I ignored her. When the veil came loose, I held it for a moment and stared at the delicate white fabric gathered in my hands. Everyone had called it beautiful. Beautiful had become a word people used to make cages sound expensive. I set the veil on the altar. Not through it. Not with drama. I placed it there gently because I was done letting other people mistake my quiet for weakness. Evan stepped toward me. Claire, stop. I looked at him, really looked, and wondered how many times his calm voice had worked on me because I had been trained to fear embarrassment more than betrayal. No, I said. One word. Small. Mine. His jaw tightened. You are upset. You should not make a decision like this in front of everyone. A laugh moved through my chest, not happy, not cruel, just amazed. That is interesting, I said. You were comfortable letting me make the biggest decision of my life in front of everyone when you thought I did not know the truth. The church went silent again, but this silence felt different. Less like judgment, more like witnesses finally understanding they had been invited to the wrong ceremony. My mother stood in the front pew, one hand pressed to her pearls, her face pale beneath flawless makeup. I turned to her, and that hurt more than turning away from Evan. Did you know he planned to take control of the house? She swallowed. I knew his family had conditions. Did you know about the documents? I knew there were legal issues. Did you know Dad said no? Her eyes closed. There it was. The answer before the words. My father had said no, and she had brought me here anyway. Something inside me cracked, but it did not collapse. It opened. Did you want me safe? I asked, my voice carrying farther than I expected. Or did you want me useful? My mother flinched as if I had placed the papers directly in her hands and made her read them aloud. Her mouth trembled. No answer came. The silence was the final signature. I looked down at the ring. The diamond still flashed under the church lights, bright and useless. Evan had chosen it without asking what I liked. My mother had cried when she saw it. Everyone had admired the size, the clarity, the promise it seemed to make. I twisted it once. My finger resisted, swollen from nerves and cold, but the ring slid free. For a second it rested in my palm, small and heavy as a lie. I placed it beside the veil. Evan's face changed. Not enough for the guests to call it anger. Just enough for me to see the man behind the groom. "You are making a mistake." "No," I said. "I am refusing to become one." Dominic Hayes stood a few feet away, still as black stone, saying nothing. That mattered. He did not reach for me. He did not tell me to come with him. He did not turn my rescue into another command. He had brought the truth to the altar and left the choice in my hands. That was the difference between power and possession. I gathered the front of my dress so I would not trip and stepped down from the altar. Gasps followed me, soft and useless. My Uncle Richard moved as if to help, then stopped when he saw my face. I did not need to be handed from one man to another. I needed the floor beneath my own feet. My mother whispered, "Claire, please." I paused beside her pew. For 1 second I saw every version of her at once. The grieving widow, the frightened woman, the mother who had mistaken my sacrifice for a solution. I wanted to forgive her because forgiveness would make the room easier to leave. But some truths deserve time before mercy. "I loved this family enough to almost disappear for it," I said. "Do not ask me for more today." Then I walked down the aisle alone. The white roses blurred at the edges of my vision. The organ remained silent. No music carried me out. No father's arm. No husband's hand. Just the sound of my own steps crossing 30 feet of carpet that no longer felt like a sentence. At the church doors, cold air touched my face, sharp and clean. For the first time in my life, I let my family be disappointed in me. And I survived it. The cold outside the church did not feel cruel. It felt honest. December air struck my cheeks and slipped beneath the lace at my shoulders, sharp enough to make me gasp, clean enough to remind me I was still alive. Behind me, St. Augustine held its breath around a ruined ceremony, 300 guests trapped between gossip and shame, my mother somewhere inside with her pearls and her silence, Evan standing at the altar beside the ring I had left behind. I expected someone to chase me. I expected hands on my arm, voices telling me to calm down, to come back, to stop making a scene. For 26 years, I had mistaken pressure for love because pressure always came dressed like concern. But no one touched me. Not even Dominic Hayes. He came through the church door several seconds after I did, his black overcoat moving in the wind, his face unreadable beneath the gray winter sky. 2 men waited near a dark sedan at the curb, but they stayed back when he lifted one hand slightly. The gesture was small. The obedience was immediate. I should have been frightened by that. Maybe I was. But fear felt different now. It no longer knew where to stand. Dominic stopped several feet away from me, leaving enough space for my dress to breathe around my ankles. The train had caught on a wet stone step, and I bent to free it before remembering how many people had spent the morning telling me not to wrinkle anything. A strange laugh escaped me. Small. Broken. "Mine. Do you have somewhere safe to go?" Dominic asked. "Not where are you going? Not come with me. Safe." The word struck me harder than it should have. I looked down the street at the line of parked cars, the bare trees, the elegant homes surrounding the church as if wealth could make any neighborhood innocent. "I do not know," I said. "The house is not mine anymore, is it?" His jaw shifted once. "It is yours. Evan only wanted you to believe otherwise." I turned toward him. "You know a lot about my life for a stranger." "Yes. No epalegi. No performance. Just truth." "Why?" He looked at the church doors, then back at me. Through the stained glass I could see shadows moving inside. People beginning to choose sides now that the bride had chosen herself. "Your father asked me to." My fingers went to the locket at my throat. The metal was cold beneath my glove. "You knew my father?" "Robert Bennett saved my life 15 years ago." The sentence entered the air quietly, but it changed everything around it. My father was an accountant. He was also brave when it cost him something. Dominic's eyes moved to the locket, and for the first time, something like memory crossed his face. I was 20. Reckless. Bleeding money and trust in every direction. Men older than me wanted me gone because I knew too much and understood too little. Your father found a way to make a debt disappear without making a man disappear with it. He paused, choosing words that did not stain the steps between us. He gave me a second chance when I had not earned one. The wind lifted the edge of my veil where it still clung to one loose pin in my hair. I pulled it free and held it in my fist. Why did he never tell me? Because he did not want you near my world. Then why are you here? Dominic looked at me fully then. There was danger in him, yes, but not hunger. Not ownership. Something older. Obligation carved into bone. Because 3 months before he died, your father came to me with documents. He believed someone close to your family was trying to corner you through the estate. He did not know all the names yet. He only knew you might one day be asked to trade your life for security. My throat tightened until the church steps blurred. He knew. He suspected enough. Dominic reached into his coat and removed a small black envelope, then held it out without stepping closer. He left instructions. Not for me to take you anywhere. Not for me to make decisions for you. Only to stand between you and the fire long enough for you to see the door. I stared at the envelope in his hand. My father's handwriting marked the front with one word. Claire. The sight of it nearly brought me to my knees. I took it carefully, expecting Dominic's fingers to close around mine, but he released the paper the instant I had it. No claim. No trap. No debt disguised as rescue. What do you want from me? I asked because every act of help I had received that year had come with fine print. Dominic's expression hardened, but not at me. At the question itself. Nothing. Nobody wants nothing. Your father already paid my debt with mercy. The church doors opened behind us, and voices spilled into the cold. Evan appeared at the top step, face pale with controlled fury, my mother just behind him, one hand pressed to her chest. Dominic did not turn. He only opened the back door of the sedan and stepped aside, leaving the street, the church, and the choice entirely mine. Where does that car go? I asked. To your father's attorney. If you want the rest of the truth. And if I do not get in, then I will close the door, and you will never see me again unless you ask. I looked at Evan. I looked at my mother. Then I looked at the envelope with my father's name written through my own. For the first time that day, the next step did not feel like surrender. It felt like mine. I got into the car because my father had written my name on an envelope, and some part of me still trusted his handwriting more than I trusted the ground beneath my feet. Dominic did not sit beside me. He took the front passenger seat, leaving me alone in the back with my dress gathered around me like a surrendered flag and the black envelope resting on my lap. Through the rear window, St. Augustine grew smaller, its stone steps crowded with people who had come for vows and stayed for scandal. Evan stood at the curb with his phone pressed to his ear, his perfect face. Sharp with panic he could no longer make attractive. My mother did not follow him. She stood beneath the church awning, one hand at her throat, watching the car pull away as if she had finally understood that losing control of me was not the same as losing me. The drive into downtown Chicago took 40 minutes, though time had become strange after the altar. December light slid across glass towers and bare trees. My bouquet lay forgotten on the seat beside me, white petals bruised at the edges from my grip. I kept touching the locket under my dress, feeling for the tiny click, wondering what else my father had hidden close to my heart because he had known I might one day need proof that love did not always arrive in time, but sometimes it prepared the road anyway. Dominic spoke only once. You do not have to open it in front of me. I looked up at the back of his head, at the dark hair brushed neatly above his collar, at the stillness that made him seem less like a man resting and more like a door guarding itself. Why are you giving me choices? He was quiet for a moment. Because your father once gave me one when I deserved none. The attorney's office was on the 22nd floor of an old building near LaSalle Street, the kind with brass elevator doors, dark green carpet, and framed certificates that smelled faintly of dust and money. Harold Stein was waiting when we arrived. He was small, white-haired, and wore a brown suit that looked older than some of Evan's groomsmen. His eyes filled when he saw me in my wedding dress, but he did not mention it. Kind people often know when naming a wound only makes it louder. "Claire," he said, "your father hoped you would never need this meeting." My throat closed. "But he prepared it." Harold nodded and led us into a conference room with tall windows overlooking the gray city. Dominic stayed near the door. I sat at the long table while Harold placed a small recorder, a folder of documents, and an old key in front of me. The key made my breath catch. It matched the locket. "He asked that you open it first," Harold said gently. My fingers shook as I lifted the locket from beneath the lace. The tiny hidden latch gave beneath the key with a soft click. Inside, behind the faded photo of my father holding me at 4 years old, was a folded strip of paper so thin it felt like a secret made of air. 3 words were written there. "Trust your voice." I covered my mouth, but the sound still escaped me, small and broken. Dominic turned his face toward the window, giving me privacy without leaving the room. Harold pressed play on the recorder. Static breathed for 1 second. Then my father's voice filled the room. "Claire, my brave girl, if you are hearing this, then I was right to worry and sorry that I could not stand beside you myself." I bent over the table as if the voice had weight. It had been 3 years since I had heard him say my name anywhere outside memory. "There are men who will call control protection," my father continued. "There are families who will call fear loyalty. Do not believe them just because they speak softly." Tears blurred the papers. Harold slid a tissue box closer without interrupting. My father explained the debt, the pressure, the way Evan's family had circled after his diagnosis, offering help that sounded generous until every clause pointed toward ownership. He said Margaret was frightened, not evil, but fear could still make a person hand over someone they loved and call it sacrifice. He said Dominic Hayes owed him nothing anymore, but had agreed to deliver the truth if no one else would. "I am not leaving you money, sweetheart," my father said, and I could hear the smile beneath the sadness. "I am leaving you proof. I am leaving you the house in a trust they cannot touch. I am leaving you the right to disappoint people who confuse your obedience with love. Most of all, I am leaving you permission to choose yourself without asking forgiveness." The recording ended with a click that sounded too final for such a small machine. I sat very still. Outside, the city moved on as if my father had not just reached through 3 years of silence and taken my hand. Harold opened the folder and showed me the trust documents, the notarized letters, the filings Evan had tried to bury, the evidence that my father had seen the trap forming. Long before I had noticed the door closing, Dominic had not saved me from the wedding. Not alone. My father had built the exit. Dominic had only opened it when I forgot I was allowed to walk through. I looked at the paper inside the locket again. "Trust your voice." For years I thought inheritance meant money, houses, names on documents. That day, I learned my father had left me something no one could mortgage. He had left me the truth. And in a city office 22 floors above the street, wearing a wedding dress meant for the wrong life, I heard his voice save me one last time. 3 weeks later, I returned to St. Augustine Church in a black coat and flat shoes, carrying a cardboard box instead of a bouquet. The sky was pale over Lake Forest, the kind of winter blue that looked clean from a distance and cold up close. Snow lined the edges of the stone steps in thin white seams. The same doors stood in front of me, tall and wooden, polished by a century of hands asking for mercy, promises, forgiveness, and things they were not always ready to keep. I had not come to forgive anyone. Not yet. I had come for my documents, my father's letters, and the last pieces of my life that had been left behind in the wreckage of a wedding that never became a marriage. Inside, the church smelled different without flowers. Wax, old paper, lemon oil on wood. The white roses were gone. The satin runner was gone. The guests were gone. Without witnesses, the aisle was only 30 feet of carpet again. I stood at the back and remembered how impossible it had felt to cross it in a dress chosen by other people, toward a man who had mistaken my silence for consent. My attorney, Harold Stein, waited near the front pew with a folder under one arm. Grace Holloway, the legal investigator Dominic had sent to help untangle the fraud, stood beside him in a charcoal suit, her silver hair tucked neatly behind one ear. Everything that had happened after that day had been quieter than scandal wanted it to be. Court filings. Emergency injunctions. frozen transfers, notarized statements. Evan's family office was under review, his smile appearing less often in society pages and more often in rooms where people asked questions he could not charm his way around. No one disappeared. No one needed to. The truth had done enough damage in daylight. My mother sat alone in the first pew. I had known she would be there, but seeing her still hurt. She looked smaller without the pearls, wrapped in a gray wool coat, hands folded around a tissue she had twisted into pieces. For a moment I saw the woman who had raised me, not the woman who had tried to trade my future for safety. That was the cruel thing about betrayal by family. Love did not vanish just because trust did. It lingered, wounded and inconvenient, in the same room as anger. "Claire," she said softly. My name sounded cautious in her mouth now. Good. I was tired of people saying it like a handle. "I am here for Dad's papers," I said. She nodded. "Harold has them." Silence spread between us, not empty, just unfinished. She looked at my hands, bare of rings, steady around the cardboard box. "I am sorry," she whispered. 3 words. Too small for what they needed to carry. Still, I let them exist. "I know." Her eyes filled. "Can you forgive me?" A month earlier, I might have given her forgiveness just to stop the pain on her face. I might have handed her peace because daughters are trained to make mothers comfortable, even when mothers have made daughters disappear. But my father's note was folded inside my wallet now. "Trust your voice." So I did. "Not today," I said. My mother closed her eyes. It hurt to watch her accept it. It also healed something to see that she could survive my boundary. Harold gave me the folder, the deed copies, the trust documents, the recording, and the original letter my father had written to Dominic. I placed them carefully in the box. Then I walked to the altar. My veil was not there anymore. Neither was the ring. Someone had removed the evidence of the girl I had almost been. That was fine. I did not need proof of the cage to know I had left it. When I stepped back outside, Dominic Hayes stood at the bottom of the church steps in a black overcoat, hands in his pockets, eyes lifted to the bare branches above the sidewalk. He had not come inside. He had learned somehow that the most powerful thing he could do for me was wait where I could choose whether to meet him. "Did you get what you needed?" he asked. "Yes." "Good." The wind moved between us. He looked the same as he had that first day and not the same at all. Still dangerous. Still quiet. But now I understood that danger could stand outside a door without becoming a lock. I stepped down one stair. Then another. My shoes touched the sidewalk. "Evan lost the house," I said. "Evan lost what was never his." "And my mother?" Dominic watched my face before answering. "She will have to live with what she chose." I nodded. That was justice too, the kind no court could file. He opened the car door behind him, then moved aside. "Where do you want to go?" I looked back at the church, at the place where I had almost given my life away under stained glass and family pressure. Then I looked forward toward the city, toward the attorney's office, toward the house that was still mine, toward a future that no longer required permission. "Home," I said. "But I want to drive myself." For the first time, Dominic smiled. "Barely. Enough. Then I will follow at a distance." I walked to my own car, box in my arms, father's truth against my heart, snow melting quietly beneath my steps. The wrong man had wanted my vow. The dangerous man had given me my voice.